Welcome to this video on the blood. This is our learning objective, to be able to describe structure and function of the components of blood. As always, all of the timestamps will be in the description below, so feel free to skip to whatever part you need help with. So these are all our definitions for this video. The first one is the red blood cell, which are cells which transport oxygen around the body. The second are white blood cells, which defend the body against infection and disease. Thirdly, we've got plasma, which is the liquid part of blood. And then finally, we have platelets, which are cell fragments involved in blood clotting. So there is no required knowledge for this video. However, this topic relates really well to the topics of transporting oxygen around the blood, and also oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange, and then finally the immune system as well. So these are the main four components of blood. First of all, we've got our red blood cells, which are pictured as shown on the screen, and we've also got white blood cells. Then in terms of the other components, we have plasma, which is the liquid component of blood, and then also platelets, which are essentially small fragments of bigger cells. The first major component of the blood are red blood cells, which are mainly responsible for transporting oxygen all around the body. So they do have a few adaptations in order to carry out this function properly. First of all, if we look at the picture of the red blood cell, we can see that it has a biconcave shape, and this means it kind of dips in toward the center. And this helps maximize its surface area to increase the rate of diffusion of gases such as oxygen and carbon dioxide. Looking at the organelles of the red blood cell, they also have no nucleus, and this just allows more space within the actual cell itself to carry as much oxygen as possible. Thirdly, red blood cells also contain hemoglobin, which can bind to oxygen to form oxyhemoglobin, and this is how it is able to transport oxygen all around the body. The next main cell type of the blood are white blood cells, which form a really major part of the immune system. So there are a couple of types of white blood cells which all have different adaptations, but generally they are larger than red blood cells, they don't have a biconcave shape, and they also possess a nucleus. So on the left, we've got an example of a type of white blood cell which produces antibodies in response to antigens found on pathogens. And then on the right, we have an example of a white blood cell which defends against infection by engulfing foreign pathogens. Also types of white blood cell which can produce antitoxins in response to toxins produced by bacteria. So platelets are the next major cell type in the blood, and these are very, very small fragments of much larger cells which don't possess a nucleus. So platelets are really important in the process of blood clotting, as for example, if we fall off our bike and we have an open wound, platelets are going to move to this site and come together to form a clot, which is then going to dry and scab over and allow our wound to heal. So if we didn't have all of these platelets in our blood, we'd have excessive bleeding and bruising if we were to get a wound. The final component of blood is plasma, which is this sort of yellow liquid which makes up about 55% of the total blood volume, and it's where all of our red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets are suspended. Its main function is to transport dissolved substances, for example, glucose, amino acids, urea, hormones, proteins, and the like. So essentially brings nutrients to cells and then also removes the resulting waste products. About 95% of it is made up of water, and then the rest is all the other dissolved substances. This is our first worked example question for this topic, so let's go through it. Figure 3.1 shows images of red blood cells from a human, A, and a bird, B. So we've got the pictures below. And then the first part of the question is to state the function of red blood cells. So the main function of red blood cells is to transport oxygen around the body. So transport O2 around body. Secondly, there is a nucleus present in each of the red blood cells of the bird, as shown in figure 3.1. So we can underline it here. State the function of a nucleus. So this goes back to knowing all of our organelle functions. So the nucleus is obviously a really important organelle in every single cell where it's present, and its function is to control the activities of the cell. So we can put down control cell activities. And finally, human red blood cells do not contain a nucleus. State an advantage of this. So this goes back to the theory we were discussing earlier about the kind of function of red blood cells and how having specific adaptations, like not having a nucleus, can allow it to do its job better. So as we've already put down, the function of red blood cells is to transport oxygen around the body. So if it doesn't have a nucleus, this means it can fit more oxygen within the inner space of the cell. So more oxygen transported. And if we're transporting more oxygen, obviously we also need more hemoglobin, as this is what binds to oxygen within the cell. So not having a nucleus also allows more space for that. So more hemoglobin kind of contained within the actual cell itself. For our second worked example question, please make sure to pause the screen and have a go at it yourself first, and then I will go through it. So the first part of the question is to describe the functions of white blood cells. So already we know that white blood cells play a really important role in the immune system to defend our body against pathogens like bacteria and viruses. So essentially for this question, we need to explain the ways in which they do this. So previously we covered that there's different types of white blood cells which carry out different functions. So we can just write down all the ones that we know for 2 marks. So first of all, we can start off with cells which produce antibodies. So we can produce antibodies, and that will be against the antigens from different pathogens. Then in terms of producing something else, we can talk about antitoxins, which obviously combat toxins produced by microorganisms. So produce antitoxins. And then finally, the other type of white blood cell actually engulfs pathogens. So that's another really important way to put down. So engulf pathogens. And that process is actually known as phagocytosis. So you can even put that down if you'd like. The second part of the question is, person B has a low number of red blood cells compared to the healthy person. Suggest an effect that this may have on person B. So for this question, we need to look at what the function of red blood cells are again. So we know they're used to transport oxygen around the body. And if you have a low number of red blood cells compared to an average person, you're not going to be transporting enough oxygen to your tissues. So this might result in, for example, shortness of breath or fatigue, amongst other symptoms. So we can put shortness of breath, fatigue, and then other symptoms could be paleness, for example, or weakness. Thank you for watching this video. By this point, you should be able to describe the structure and function of each of the 4 main components of blood as shown on the screen. Now go and do some more exam style practice questions on this topic.